Good evening, and tonight on UFG News, tensions continue to rise as Fukushima prepares to host a section of the 2020 Olympic torch relay. Residents have raised concerns that the relay is a display of Fukushima's recovery, ignoring parts of the region that remain deserted and the number of evacuees who are still living in temporary housing. As today marks the anniversary of the tragic event of March the 11th, 2011, we take a look back on the destruction and loss that Fukushima continues to battle with 9 years on. At 2:46 p.m, the 9.0 magnitude Tohoku earthquake struck the northeastern coast of Japan as the Pacific plate subducted beneath the Eurasian plate, releasing centuries of mounting tectonic stress, the result of which can be felt in 6 minutes of shaking alongside a further 401 confirmed aftershocks. An inquiry into the events in the years thereafter discovered a thin layer of low-friction clay which was attributed to the rapid plate movement which jolted at an astonishing 50-metre distance. Sadly, the destruction was far from over as Japan's location on the Pacific Rim made it particularly vulnerable to the secondary hazard event that followed, a tsunami. The 14-metre wave was created when the ruptured stretch of the subduction zone caused gravitational imbalance, displacing voluminous bodies of water attempting to regain their gravitational stability. In the process of which, over 1 million buildings were destroyed or severely damaged. Loss of life has been estimated at 20,000, mainly as a result of the tsunami, with a further 160,000 people displaced from the disaster. As the tsunami reached the Fukushima nuclear power plant, the water levels inundated the power generators, which were vital to cooling of the reactors, which mitigated the occurrence of a nuclear explosion. The inability to cool the reactors resulted in massive hydrogen explosions and releases of radioactive activity. Whilst the danger of radioactive exposure is estimated to have affected 18,500 people, there remains substantial uncertainty over the impacts of the radiation to unborn children and cancer levels. Overall, the economic cost of recovery has increased to over $202 billion, but with the ongoing reconstruction efforts, these figures are likely to surge. Among the destruction, PTSD and trauma has emerged among the power plant workers who have experienced loss and discrimination at the hands of the accident. Furthermore, the trauma has forced displacement is rife, especially amongst the elderly population, many of those who feel a loss of identity and belonging impacting their mental well-being. Their physical well-being has similarly been disproportionately compromised, with higher morbidity rates and the exacerbation of chronic health conditions. Evacuations and the movement between temporary housing has also been criticised for overlooking the unique needs of disabled individuals, as they experience greater vulnerability to the impact of the environmental calamities. In a report by Japan's Nuclear Emergency Task Force, the government admitted to its ill-preparedness, which led to the scale of destruction that followed the earthquake and tsunami. One of the most damning failings regarding the height of the tsunami wall, which was less than 6 metres tall and confronted by a tsunami wave of approximately 14 metres. The wall's construction was based on seismic knowledge at the time of the plant's construction in 1967, and whilst contemporary revisions pointed out its insufficiency, TEPCO disregarded these warnings. Mitigation methods for the earthquake activity were equally insufficient. Support systems for nuclear units were outdated, with the revision of their design has been currently postponed until 2016. Responsibilities were further restricted by loss of electrical functions and lighting, a possibility that hadn't been considered. The government began instructing a series of evacuations within a 20-kilometre radius of the nuclear power plant. 2 weeks later, those in a 30-kilometre radius of the site were also ordered to evacuate. The government were critiqued at the time for the poor organisation and mishandling of data, failing to communicate the areas to which would be affected by the radioactivity. In the 2017 court case, the Japanese government were found negligent in their disaster response, resulting in the payment of hundreds of evacuees following the disaster. The public response was one of panic. Due to the poor communication and public confusion, many residents fled, hospital staff left their patients, and aid organisations deserted the region. 9 years since the devastation, uncertainty remains as Fukushima's recovery time extends to include the agricultural recovery from the nuclear radiation. 24 countries maintain their ban on Fukushima's produce after 56% of fish stocks were found to be contaminated, heightening the vulnerability of communities who rely on their agriculture to sustain their livelihoods. The Environment Minister was warning that the only option will be to drain the contaminated water into the oceans, raising concerns that this will initiate international conflict. The mishandling of risk and evacuation information resulted in some residents unnecessarily moving from radiation safe zones to areas of radiation exposure. As a result, community risk perception years after the disaster is one clouded with confusion and distrust towards the government and recovering bodies, undermining reconstruction and preparation efforts. Learning from the mistakes of 2011, the 2016 Fukushima earthquake response employed real-time national broadcasting to ensure a more effective and fast public evacuation. Clear-up is ongoing, however the damage of the 2011 accident has halted Japan's nuclear power plants, preventing the likelihood of similar triple-threat disasters to occur on Japanese soil in the near future.